Manos, The Hands of Fate is a bad movie. There's no reason to go into hyperbole, to compare it to bodily fluid or something like that. It fails in a few fundamental ways that would break any story ever written. Obtuse fanfiction plot, weak production values, uninspired act. We could talk more about this 1966 Dracula retelling, but that's not why we're here. We're here to take a look at Freakzone Games' homage to one of the most miserable excuses for a story ever put to film. Like Freakzone Games' AVGN Adventures, Manos is a side-scrolling retro jump-and-shoot, known largely for its punishing difficulty. We'll talk more about that in a second, but first I want to get some housekeeping out of the way. Manos follows the story of Steven, his girlfriend, and their dog Pepper. Did you notice I didn't give the girlfriend's name? It's because I don't remember it. Manos the game is a smash-and-grab retelling of the movie, punching from scene to scene with a minimum of storytelling. Unless you're already familiar with the movie, it's likely the game will leave you confused and uninterested in the goings-on. To distill it down to storyboard, a family gets lost on the road and ends up stumbling across Valley Lodge, a structure in the desert where a caretaker named Torgo watches over the place. The master of the house, who is completely not Dracula, does... You know what? No one cares. Seriously. If you want to know about this movie, check out the Mystery Science Theater 3000 version. Unfortunately, a lack of familiarity with the movie can make some of the references fall flat. So who are the bosses? Why do I care if anyone escapes this place? Do I even care if Steven escapes?
Audio and visual.
Unlike AVGN Adventures, Manos isn't really a thing of visual beauty. In keeping with the low-budget aesthetic of the movie, backgrounds tend toward bland browns and grays. Several of the enemies are cluttered messes, so cluttered I couldn't tell what they were supposed to be. Steven himself looks fine, but the visual high point in the game comes during the occasional cutscene featuring artwork reminiscent of Ninja Gaiden on NES, and these cutscenes are excellent, especially compared to the very basic visual style of the rest of the game. Musically, Manos shines. While the tracks aren't as bombastic as AVGN Adventures, P.S. you're going to be hearing a lot of references to AVGN Adventures, they're solid entries that fit the aesthetic nicely, and a reminder of how excellent retro music can be. Sound effects largely fit that bill too. Everything sounds the way largely it should. The guns in particular have a great punch to them. Except, and holy fuck is it a big except, a couple of enemies create some of the most irritating sounds I can recall hearing in a video game. The squealing skeleton heads and curlicue pattern UFOs, yes, fucking UFOs, whine with an ear-gnawing discord that is fine for a few moments, but murder for several. I can't tell if their vocalizations are partly intended to annoy the player into getting killed, but I don't want to hear them ever again. Ever.
Gameplay and mechanics.
It's a jump-and-shoot side-scroller. There's nothing complicated. No sub-weapons. No alternate characters. Just jump and shoot. Level design mostly is horizontal with a minimum of backtracking and such, and of course I'm talking about the main body of the game. Start, go right. Dodge a bunch of shit. Kill a boss that's bereft of personality, and repeat. In general, it's satisfying to blast enemies into paste with Steven's unlimited pistol, and even better to erupt shotgun fire at a crowd. Shotgun fire being, from what I can tell, the only power-up available in the game. There are coins and diamonds to collect, but they seem only to be there for score purposes, and I find myself ignoring them for the most part. But I've danced around the maypole long enough, I guess. Manos is hard. Like, really fucking hard. I've been watching this game get brutalized a bit on Twitter for the last few days for its difficulty, while the developer and others defend old-school challenge. Now, I'm not opposed to a challenge. Because retro gaming is such a big thing these days, I tend to look at such releases with two parameters in mind. Most likely a modern retro game isn't going to bring anything new or innovative to the table, so ask the following questions. Number 1. Does it exemplify the old style while bringing its features up to date, like Shovel Knight and The Binding of Isaac? Those two games essentially take Mega Man and The Legend of Zelda and update them with vastly improved visuals, better frame rates, more versatility in powers and stage design, better music, and so forth, but the core remains the same. Number 2, and most importantly, is it fun? So let's ask those questions about Manos. Does it exemplify and improve upon the old style? Yes and then no. Manos' art direction and ultra-basic mechanics are clear throwbacks to yesteryear. Such simplicity demands graceful level design, though, and Manos' level design just doesn't do it for the most part. I feel like there was room here for a labyrinthine environment, not quite as complex as a Metroidvania title, but similar, full of trapdoors and secret passages and the like. Instead, Manos is pretty much just left to right. The visuals don't pop. Your character's abilities don't change. There's no growth. Quick tangent, by the way. Steven's jumps are fickle things. Numerous pits are so wide that they appear impassable on first glance, and in fact, Steven appears not to make the jumps no matter how hard you try. However, if the tip of his toe hits the other side in the right way, Steven sort of glitches and pops up onto the other end of the platform. This seems to be a requirement to get across several holes. In no universe should this be a frequent occurrence. Jumps should look exactly long enough to be made based on the character's ability. You should never have to toe something and then glitch up to complete the jump. The knockback in this game is atrocious, sending Steven directly back about 3 character lengths and typically sending us hurtling to our doom. Enemy placement is brutal, as threats often appear from off-screen at point-blank range. The game is tremendously forgiving in the health and extra lives department, but the swiftness and sudden appearance of enemies combined with Steven's great on-screen size means it's easy to be hit over and over and over. Many segments of the game become trial and error fucking blows. But let's talk about Stage 5. Stage 5. Fuck a bunch of Stage 5. Shortly into this stage, Steven boards a biplane for a horizontal shmup segment, and I goddamn hate it. Everything that applies to Steven regarding limited mobility and large screen size is tripled here. Unlike the rest of the game, Steven in the plane has no health meter. There's a brief Flappy Bird segment minus flapping, including a 1-up get that's pretty much a death sentence. Steven dies here in one hit. One fucking hit. There's no repeat. No repeat. No excuse for that. This is exactly the setup that made Isaac's The Lost such a fucking chore to play, but at least The Lost had maneuverability and growth potential. Steven has neither. By the time that you reached The Lost, you had earned your way to that challenge, and it felt like a challenge that was built through the experiences you've had already. It felt like the last mountain to overcome. This is part of the game, and it's only about halfway through the game as far as I can tell. It just doesn't have the build-up that it requires for such a painfully difficult segment. We are rewarded thereafter with a battle against the Giant Claw, but it only just makes up for this trial and error segment. For those who don't know, the Giant Claw is a late 50s B-movie monster, sort of prehistoric alien bird thing, that also appears in the AVGN game because, fuck continuity, I guess. I don't really care. It's the Giant Claw, so I'm pleased no matter what. In summary, mechanically the game functions, but its challenge rolls over into cheapness, and it takes away from the overall experience. So Manos doesn't really improve on the old formulas. Let's address question 2. Is it fun? Okay, here's the deal. I had fun with Manos' first 4 stages. After that, every single stage became a frustrating slog that made me feel trapped and helpless. Trapped is not a good feeling for a video game player unless we're talking about a legit horror game, which Manos isn't. It's not really meant to be scary, or at least it doesn't appear that way. I made the comparison to Super Mario Bros. Difficulty on Twitter, but on further scrutiny that comparison falls apart. Mario, and let me be perfectly clear about this, I'm not a Mario fanboy. To me, the series was over after Super Mario World. Burn me alive if you like, but I thought Mario 64 was horrible. I hated it. I just didn't have fun playing it. Now, I appreciate people who do. That's great. And I know it was a benchmark for moving the genre into 3D, which is fun. But it didn't do it for me, and ever since then, I just haven't had any interest in Mario games. The same thing happened with me in The Legend of Zelda with Ocarina of Time. To me, Super Mario Bros. 3, and maybe Super Mario World, it's pretty close, represent the benchmarks for platformer design. If you take a look at the original Super Mario Bros. For the NES, one notices several aspects that make it superior to something like Manos, even though the sort of difficulty curve that Manos has is meant to be a throwback to games of that era. In Super Mario Bros. 3, collectibles actually matter. Yeah, there's a score, but picking up coins can result in extra lives, so there's actually a reason to grab them. Power-ups exist. Yeah, Manos has the shotgun power-up, which is amazing. But Super Mario Bros. Has 3 power-ups, and at least one of which greatly changes how a player approaches challenges, and that would be the Fire Flower. Manos' shotgun is great, but because you're going to get hit so quickly, and you lose it when you get hit, it actually isn't going to change your approach very much. You won't have time to use it to adjust your playing strategy. Levels have a sense of momentum and flow. Manos proceeds largely in choppy bits. Move, wait a while for threats, move, die a bunch, repeat. Super Mario Bros. Levels tend to chug along at a consistent clip, keeping events moving forward neatly, and part of that is because Mario has a sense of physics. Whenever he moves, there's a little bit of hang-on at the end of his run where he slides forward a little bit. He feels like he has weight. Manos really does... I'm sorry, I keep calling the main character Manos. Steven, he really doesn't have a lot of... His physics feel off. His jumps are floaty, and he doesn't seem... I don't know, the physics and weight of him just seem wrong somehow, like the gravity isn't quite right in the game. But Mario's momentum keeps those levels moving forward at a consistent pace, and gives the game a sense of flow that Manos really doesn't have. This actually leads into the next point. Super Mario Bros. Has no knockback. And I know this is a stylistic choice for Manos, but even though it's a homage, knockback is fucking annoying and unnecessary. Just because it's part of the old retro style doesn't mean we need to employ it. Some things were left behind for reasons, When he's hit, you hear a popping kind of sound, and he's pushed abruptly back several character lengths. And it's choppy and sudden, like the movement progression in the game. And it breaks the flow because in a blink of an eye, you're 3 character lengths away from where you were, and you're probably dead if you take a hit. And it breaks the flow for me. A consistent difficulty curve. Super Mario Bros. Mostly rises pretty steadily in difficulty, where Manos spikes and dips after the first few levels. An interesting boss. Yes, in Super Mario Bros. You fight Bowser 8 times, but the King of the Koopa is far more menacing and intriguing than Random Werewolf or the strange fat guy with Morticia Addams look-alike. The only boss in Manos that I've played against that is superior is, of course, the legendary Giant Claw. Even that battle is cheap and annoying, but it's a Giant Claw, so it's forgiven. Now, you may ask, dude, how can you compare Manos, an indie game based on a herpes pustule of a movie, to Super Mario Bros., an unforgettable classic, man? Easy, because there have been 3 decades to grow and build on the Mario formula. Manos just doesn't feel like it's learned enough of those lessons. Just because it's a retro callback doesn't mean it should include all the flaws of games past. Retro games could have save states, for example, without betraying their roots. They can support parallax scrolling. They can have retro soundtracks with better instrumentation, which is actually an area where Manos succeeds. While it's clear a lot of love and effort went into Manos, and I'm a fan of Freakzone Games in general, around Stage 5 the novelty wore off, and the cheap difficulty turned a fun experience into a painful slog. Full disclosure, I reached the halfway point of level 8, which was a callback to the old Castlevania 3 descending tower level, and I decided it wasn't worth it to me to keep playing anymore. Because the game doesn't really offer anything innovative or new, it has to remain fun. And when it starts to feel like work, then it's time to put it down. What makes this game different from AVGN Adventures is AVGN Adventures had a ton of personality and fun. Even dying was fun because of the nerd's game over screen statements. Manos is just depressing. You'll see that game over screen numerous times. And with the bland color palette, the less bombastic music, the far less interesting bosses, I'm hard-pressed to recommend Manos as a $5 purchase. And you know what? If you really are a hardcore gamer and you want an incredibly cheap trial and error challenge, you should totally get this. And if you're a big fan of the movie, if you're among that cult classic crowd, go ahead and get the game. It can't hurt. But if you're on a budget, if you have to make very careful choices about what games you purchase, I would advise leaving Manos in the same dustbin of history that the movie belongs. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a Trevisionist review of Manos: The Hands of Fate by Freakzone Games. I appreciate all 2 of you coming to listen to this particular mess, and I hope whatever it is you're doing today is amazing and spouts golden rainbows from every conceivable orifice.